Member for Capel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, for the honour that you give me in being able to address the Assembly today. I thank the Premier for the honour of sitting through my speech, and I know that he probably has to sit through quite a few. I thank you for the honour of actually being here for mine. I'd also like to thank and congratulate the member for Kingsley for the reply of address yesterday. I'm not going to try and make a habit of correcting members when they actually make a speech, but if I might just make a small correction to the speech that you gave yesterday when you discussed coats. And if you give somebody an old coat, apparently it'll be tossed away on the scrap heap. And if you give somebody a new coat, then it will be looked after. But I'd have to tell you from experience that in our area, if you give somebody a new coat, that will also be thrown on the scrap heap. And if you want someone to respect their coat, then you have to give them a job and let them buy their own coat. And at that stage, then perhaps the coat will get the respect that it deserves. Mr Speaker, can I also, although he's not in the chamber, commend to the government the member for Collie, who has done an admirable job over the years, in the last 4 years, in looking after many of the electors that are now formed in the seat of Capel, because the seat of Capel is a new seat, and the respect that the electorate in my area holds for the member for Collie holds him in good stead. Mr Speaker, while I'm quoting things, I'm intrigued as I listened to His Honour the Governor yesterday discuss the legislative program for the next term of Parliament. And I find that very interesting. There's an overriding statement from this learned gentleman, and he said that the government is committed to the provision of quality and affordable services for all Western Australians, and I think that's very admirable. And then he then adds the rider onto that, wherever they live. Mr Speaker, I find myself wondering why wherever they live would actually make any difference. Why is there a rider on such an overwhelming statement? Could it be that the Governor actually thinks that where people live makes a difference to the quality of services that they receive? And if that's the case, then perhaps this Parliament and this House should perhaps take a lead from the words of the Governor. The danger is, Mr Speaker, that perhaps the Governor is right and where you live actually does make a difference. And therefore the danger of one vote, one value should be obvious to this House. Speaker, it was a long and difficult campaign in the seat of Capel, and that's particularly because the seat of Capel is a brand new seat. While there are other changes to various boundaries across this state, there are in very few places where there a brand new seat created. It made the job of selling the seat of Capel very difficult. I'd like the House to be aware, Mr Speaker, that there was a great resentment to the seat of Capel being developed across the southwest. The people in the Busselton end of the seat of Capel went to polling booths, had their name scratched off the list and tore up their voting cards, rather than be a part of the democratic process, because they'd always voted in the seat of Vass. It's intriguing, Mr Premier, that it might be that your one vote, one value legislation gives them back their wish. I find it interesting and difficult to make inroads in terms of being part of the member for the seat of Capel. And perhaps I don't so much think of itself as a disrespect to myself, but a disrespect for the seat of Capel. It is very difficult, Mr Speaker, to be on the edge of a large number of rural areas. When various members of the Liberal Party would come to the seat of Capel during the period of election, we'd stop at the important things in the southwest. We'd stop at Bunbury Regional Hospital, Mr Speaker. And the member for Bunbury would talk about the Bunbury Regional Hospital with the leader. And at the end, I would say, the Bunbury Regional Hospital is in the seat of Capel, as is Edith Cowan University, as is Bunbury TAFE, as is large parts of the service throughout the southwest. I have difficulty, Mr Speaker, in making the media and other people aware that the seat of Capel is an important and integral part of what happens in the southwest. And I seek the support of both sides of houses, because the next 4 years, whether one vote, one value comes along or not, will be extremely difficult. And if it doesn't, then the member for Capel in the future will continue to have the same difficulties. And it's important for both sides of the House and all members of Parliament to recognise this. Mr. Speaker, let me give you an example of this particular issue, because it's an issue that's very close to my heart. I was the chairman of the South West Health Forum for a great period of time. And during that time, we presented the South West Health Plan. When we presented that plan, it was accepted by the then Minister for Health, Mr. John Day, who is still a member of this House. It was then supported by the next Minister for Health, Mr. Bob Kachira, who is still a member of this House. And it is, Mr. Speaker, the only plan, the Reid report notwithstanding, in any health district in the last 10 years virtually that has not been thrown on the scrap heap. I would commend that plan to the government and to the Minister for Health, and I would recommend that that plan expires in 2006, and it is time for the government to review the service delivery of health across the South West and to make sure that the planning process for those services goes on. Because otherwise, Mr. Speaker, with the mess that we have in terms of mental health service delivery, the difficulties that are faced by disabilities and disabled people in my electorate will spread across the South West without adequate planning. And the time for that planning is coming very soon. I hope the Minister will take that on board and move as quickly as possible. Mr. Speaker, the other great area, of course, in the South West that I have a large area of experience is agriculture. And I would like to think that we will be working with the government as much as against the government to look after those areas of agriculture that are particularly dominant in the seat of Capel. In particular, Mr. Speaker, although the greatest areas of agriculture and agricultural production in this state are wheat and wool, large numbers of other producers exist, and to some degree are the poor country cousins in agriculture in this state. And I hope to bring to the attention of the Minister at the appropriate time that these areas also are deserving of support and require as much help as possible. I'd like to thank some people who helped me during my campaign, particularly a campaign team. I'd like to thank Lucille Peace, Mary Silcock, Lou Tui, Peter Heerman, Penny Heerman, Glennie Carratti, Terry Shine, Don Weatherall, Jack Kitchen, Merv Johnston and Keith Rose. But Mr. Speaker, in particular I'd like to thank three people that were probably integral in my campaign. But more importantly, were all candidates at some stage for election themselves. And it's been brought home to me in no uncertain terms that there are many, many good potential members of Parliament on both sides of the House that never got there, due to politics, due to factionalism, due to lots of reasons that kept lots of people underfoot. So, Mr. Speaker, if I could dedicate the win in the seat of Capel, and being the inaugural member of Capel, and perhaps the ultimate member of Capel, to three men, John Silcock, Brian Peace and Ken Carratti, all of whom stood for election at some stage or in pre-selection, all of whom would have made excellent members of Parliament. And it could be said that there, but for the grace of God, go I, and potentially many others who sit in this room. These three men would have made excellent members of Parliament, and I'm saddened to see that their ambitions were never recognised and the contributions they could have made were never made. Mr. Speaker, going through an election campaign was a great learning curve. I learnt many things. If I can, in my own humble way, suggest that I probably door-knocked as many houses as any person on either side of the house during my campaign, wearing out a couple of pairs of shoes. I learnt probably one particularly important thing, and that is that every life story is important. And I think that's something that we easily forget. We can forget about the person who's unimportant. We can forget about an elector who's just another number. But what I discover is that every life story is important. And I think in the perhaps rather temporary and ghostly life of politics that I may be looking at over the next 4 years, I think that's the message that I'd like to deliver and leave. That every life and every piece of work is important, and in the next 4 years I'll be a representative of that. And I'll be looking after every person that comes along. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity today. I look forward to at least 4 years of robust debate, and I hope that I will live up to the expectations of the people who put me here. Thank you.